Longtime conservative activist here in the Granite State. Her name is Fran Wendelboe. She's a former state representative. She's made a bid or two for the state senate and lost in some tough primaries as a conservative in areas that maybe aren't as conservative as they used to be once upon a time. But Fran is among a group that is launching a new initiative here in the state of New Hampshire. We reported on it this morning during our Girard at Large radio show. It's the 603 Alliance, and we saw her here and invited her to the microphone so she can talk to the audience and let us know what's going on. So, Fran, I want to take a moment to introduce yourself personally and professionally to our audience, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a pleasure. This Sunday we're having a summit right here at the Crown Plaza in Nashua with a whole list of speakers, none of which are presidential candidates. We want it to be a candidate-free zone. We've invited a number of grassroots activists from all over New Hampshire. And we're going to have some great speakers ranging from issues about Common Core, immigration, taxes, freedoms. The 603 Alliance is about restoring constitutional controls at all levels of government. We want to support candidates who meet the principles of the 603 Alliance. But what we're proposing is what's happened in recent election cycles at the presidential level is that you've got a number of great candidates that are conservatives and everybody splits up their vote. So what we're working towards is to have a caucus in October, and we're going to bring Republican voters and undeclared voters together, and we're going to winnow down the field and pick the candidate that those people feel at that point in time is the best candidate to go up against who is likely to be an establishment moderate. We've had the establishment moderates for the last 3 cycles, and we lose every time. The time is right, and conservatives are saying, if we keep splitting our vote, we're never going to win. We're never going to have a Reagan-esque great conservative candidate.
Well, let me ask you something, because it's an interesting concept, because I don't know how you winnow that field down. So, I mean, is there sort of like a checklist of issues and criterion, or is it going to be sort of like, we'll know it when we see it? Because, getting conservatives together on something like this, I think it's a lot like herding geese, cats, and chickens all at once. It's a tough business. And so I understand the concept. I just don't understand how it works.
Well, when we had our first meeting with the grassroots leaders of these various conservative groups, the Tea Party groups, the anti-tax groups, the anti-Common Core people, the 912 groups, the libertarians, I figured it was going to be mayhem. But as we rolled out our concerns about the upcoming New Hampshire primary and the likelihood of a good conservative candidate not being successful in that, people were nodding their heads when we talked about the need to coalesce behind and unify behind one candidate. And their comment was, this is the leadership is what's been needed on this issue. You're absolutely right. None of them disagreed with the concept that we need to reach a point that we're going to make a strong decision to get behind one candidate to level that playing field.
Now, when are you going to make this decision? I mean, is there a time frame? To some degree, we're talking about 20 potential presidential candidates, 19 of whom are here, and frankly, one of the most conservative ones in the field, Senator Santorum, is not, because he's got a schedule conflict with an event he had prearranged in Pennsylvania, I think it is. But is there a time frame, a checklist? I mean, I get the concept, but isn't this field going to kind of winnow itself down? I mean, it's not possible to think that all 20 of these individuals are going to get in the race.
Oh, it doesn't take 20. All it takes is 6 or 8,
right.
And you're doomed. You're doomed as
right.
a conservative, because there's no way that you're going to get enough votes for any one of those candidates that's going to come anywhere close to the front runner of the moderates, the establishment. So if everybody gets 8, 9, 10%, and you've got another candidate with 35%, there's no bounce coming out of New Hampshire for any conservative candidate. Whereas if you could, whatever the number is, if it's 8 or 10, people don't end up running. Everybody's very careful to say, if I run. Even Jeb Bush just now just said, well, if I do this. But if you still have 8 candidates in the race in October, and that's when we're looking at having this caucus, middle of October, then the 603 Alliance will endorse that candidate, And the idea of having it 3 months before our primary is so that we then would work to help that candidate advance over the other candidates to win the New Hampshire primary and get that huge bump. We really can determine who comes out of New Hampshire on a level playing field if there's a closeness. We might not win, but if we have a candidate that we coalesce behind that comes in a good second, we've been a huge success.
Well, now how, and by the way, John or Sid, if you have questions, just flag me and jump on in. But how broad a coalition are you looking at here? I mean, you're saying grassroots Republicans from around the state are coming in. How broad a coalition are you looking at? I mean, and what kinds of are we talking? Life, guns, marriage? What's the coalition look like?
The coalition, the principles are focusing more on the things that we can agree on, constitutional principles. We're trying to keep the social issues somewhat to the side at this point in time. But you're libertarians. You know, there's some things the libertarians would like us to say that, you know, we're supporting. We're not going there. We're going to talk about what unifies the most of us and work from there. And then when we get down to that October caucus, that's when people are going to say, okay, I can't vote for that guy because he's not pro-life enough for me, or I can't vote for that guy because he doesn't believe in, you know, same-sex marriage, or I can't vote for that one. And as it winnows away and people have to make the hard choices and say, okay, these are my only options left, you know, then we'll see who is the most palatable to the most of them. And this caucus is going to be open to all of the candidates, whether they're ones that we think meet the principles of the 603 Alliance, as well as to all registered Republican and undeclared voters. So it's not a closed thing that's only for conservatives.
John, Sid, any questions, comments you want to add?
Well, I'm just wondering, you know, in discussions I've had with lots of people, one theme that seems to be coming up more and more is that the lesser of two evils is still evil. And so I wonder, have you heard any of that sentiment expressed yet, which would seem to sort of work against what you're trying to accomplish? And if you have, how are you combating that attitude?
You know, that's a great question, because we faced it in the U.S. Senate race here last election. With
in
some
spades.
people, you know, felt that they were sacrificing their principles to vote for Scott Brown.
And in doing so, got the worst Jeanne Shaheen.
Right. You know, you have to reach a point, and I personally will advocate, if our candidate that wins the caucus is not the nominee of the party, I'm going to vote for the nominee of the party. I'll hold my nose if it's somebody that I don't particularly love, because I know that nominee will be better than a Hillary Clinton any day. And that's what it comes down to. But you can't just give up and say, you know, I'm along for the ride. Whoever the establishment picks will end up with, and I'll have to hope they'll be strong enough. You shouldn't give up your choices. You should still be able to fight. So hopefully you will have a candidate that you can get behind the whole way. But Republicans have to realize that they have to look at the greater evil.
If you have a question, comment, or concern for Fran Wendelboe, former state rep here in the state of New Hampshire, longtime conservative activist, and now one of the founders of the 603 Alliance, you can give us a ring at area code 603-606-6762. That's area code 603-606-6762. Now, there's got to be a presumption here that somewhere there's got to be a litmus test for what constitutes a conservative candidate versus what constitutes a moderate candidate. So, surveying the field, who would you say? Give me whichever list is shorter, the conservatives or the non-conservatives, in the opinion of your organization.
Well, you know, Rich, we have a separate committee working on the criteria.
Oh my God,
there's a committee. We have a very long list of positions in the presidential race that we are vetting the candidates against. We want to be able to justify when we say this candidate will work with, this one we won't. We want to be able to clearly justify the reasons why. Common Core is a big one.
Yep.
Immigration is a big one. And as you know, candidates tend to evolve on their positions.
I just think I heard an evolution in the last speech.
Oh, did we not?
No, you didn't.
No,
we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard an evolution.
And I'll give you an example. perfect example, and he's probably, not be on his Christmas card list now, but, Donald Trump talks about he has a concealed carry permit, and he's a big supporter of Second Amendment rights. But yet you don't have to Google very far to come up with statements where he said that gun owners aren't willing to have reasonable laws about restricting guns. So how do
you mean
those
that
two
Donald
things,
has evolved?
So how do you, do you believe them what they say now versus what, or what they're saying now versus what their voting record was before? That's the fine, issue.
Right. And so what kind of effort is going into now? So we've talked about Common Core and immigration. I'm assuming guns is on the list, but what is the issue set? If you haven't come up with the scorecard,
right?
Or I actually, if you haven't scored the candidates yet on the scale that you're going to use, what is on the scale that you're going to use?
Oh, I wish I'd brought the list of questions. There's a number of issues, from foreign relations to fiscal, economic issues, freedom issues, overregulation of government, things like letting the UN put restrictions on what you should do as a country and so on. Totally that we believe in the strong sovereignty of the United States of America. Things like that, that aren't simple yes and no answers.
Gotcha. So, Fran, go ahead, Sid.
Yeah, it seems you have a rather big challenge in gaining consensus in these kind of groups. And right now it seems you have one major goal, and that's the presidential election. Do you see yourself as a group that's going to go into the future and look at other candidates at other levels, at the Senate, the governorship, things like that in the future? Are you going to continue to try to get this kind of herding of the cats, so to speak?
Absolutely. As soon as the presidential primary is over, then our focus will turn to state and federal elections that impact New Hampshire.
Good.
Very good. So, Fran, if people want to learn more about your efforts and see whether or not it's something they'd like to get involved with, because it sounds to me like you're kind of at the beginning stages, and maybe it's a ground floor opportunity for someone to be part of something that might lead to something that might lead to something, if you know what I mean. How do people get involved?
Well, the first thing is they can go to our website at 603.org, www.603.org, and learn more there. And there's phone numbers, there's email, and so on, where people can extend questions. We also are going to be here from 9 to 3 on Sunday. We have a list of great speakers. Congressman Steve King is going to be here, Betsy McCoy, talking about, she's an author on Obamacare. We have two great speakers from the Center for Immigration Studies that are going to be here. We have this very interesting woman called Barbara from Harlem.
Barbara from Harlem.
And I have not been able to find a last name for this woman. I guess she's kind of like Cher from Hollywood. But she was a liberal Democrat, Jesse Jackson supporter who has evolved to a Tea Party conservative Republican. And she has a great story to tell how she had her epiphany, so to speak.
Tell us, is she honestly? Do you know whether or not she's doing drugs or?
I don't know. I'm one of the most exciting speakers that I'm looking forward to. We also have Trevor Loudon from New Zealand, who is an expert on Marxism. That'll be talking about foreign relations and issues like that.
So there's no particular governing philosophy or theory or set of principles right now as this group comes together. You're just trying to network together a bunch of conservative, issue-oriented groups to try to get them all on the same page, to get them, behind one horse, so that we can sort of
build a consensus.
Or just put their collective weight behind a candidate and try to pick a winner, I guess.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
It's an interesting effort, and I wish you well. I just sometimes think that maybe one of the reasons why we can't come to consensus is because the right leader hasn't come forward.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I was at the Young Americans for Freedom.
The YAFs.
The YAFs, yes, here in Nashua a couple of weeks ago, and they showed a video by Stephen Bannon of Breitbart who did this many years ago about Reagan and what the press was saying about Reagan when he was a candidate. And he sounded like something that came out of, straight from hell, and had horns, and he was going to ruin America, and he was just terrible. And to see that and to compare it to the media now and how they try to make Republican candidates seem like they're just, evil, it was striking that nothing's changed with the demonization of the Republican Party in all these years. And Reagan still survived it, and we had probably one of our greatest presidents, if not the greatest. So I have hope that it can happen again.
Well, but here's the thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to wind the interview down for a second, but instead what I'm going to do is I gotta do a sponsor plug, and I want to thank the John Birch Society for supporting our effort today. The JBS has opposed calls for a modern-day constitutional convention for decades and seeks to work through Congress for constitutional amendments rather than through the state legislatures to amend the Constitution. Many view a con, as it's known, as a quick way to pass amendments they think will stop the big government juggernaut. The remedy so desperately needed to return our country to good government is to force the Constitution. Is to enforce the Constitution, not amendment. To learn more, visit JBS, that stands for John Birch Society, jbs.org/issues-pages/no-con-con. And there are dashes between no, con, and con. So one more time, it's JBS for John Birch Society.org/issues pages/no-con-con. And between all of those words, after you hear me say slash, there's a dash. Slash and dash. All right, so, one of the things that people forget about Reagan, they remember the affable, lovable, eloquent, great communicator. Somehow they don't remember that he was actually almost a brutal partisan. And when I say brutal, he was undeterred, he was unshaken, he was unapologetic about what he believed, and he made the case. He made the argument. He informed people, and if he didn't bring them along because he converted them, they at least respected him because he believed it and he wasn't afraid of it. And I have to say that as a conservative, it seems to me that we have lost, for whatever reason, those kinds of candidates who will come forward with the courage of their convictions and be willing to argue for it, be willing to fight for it, and be willing to stand for it. How do you change that?
Wow. Well, it goes down to compromise. What become the word of politics. Somebody just asked the question of Governor Bush about what Democrats are you able to work with? And, of course,
I heard that question.
And of course the answer is, well, I can work with anybody, but you don't give away the farm. And he did give some very good examples with Cuba, how literally Obama gave away the farm. We've seen time and time again under the Obama administration apologizing for America instead of being from a position of strength, which is what Reagan did. And, if you act firm in your convictions, people trust in you. If you look like you're waffling, they start questioning your judgment. But if you are firm in your commitment...
If you stand guilty as accused by trying to avoid the issue and switch the topic...
Exactly. So I think people, to some degree, want to have a fearless leader, somebody that shows them the way. MacArthur, Eisenhower. You didn't want weak generals that were sitting around going, should we do this? Should we do that? Patton, exactly.
Except they killed Patton, but, well, they did.
Well,
Bill O'Reilly wrote a book about it. I mean, it must be true.
Killing Fran,
Yeah, my son is reading it, actually. But no, I'm just getting a little punchy. I've been up since 3:30 in the morning. But continue, Frank, because you're making some excellent points.
Well, no, I think people are looking for leadership. We have not had leadership in the Obama administration. We have things crammed down our throats that we resent, that are wrong. And when Republicans say, no, this is wrong and we're not going to take it anymore, and they try to do things like was attempted with the government shutdown, we're the bad guys. Instead of saying, yes, they're right, they should do this.
See, now I'm going to disagree with you on one point. And that is, I am not of the opinion that Obama is not leading. I'm of the opinion that Obama is leading rather effectively, because I can't think of a thing the man has wanted that he hasn't gotten, with the exception of immigration, which I don't think he really wants, because he hasn't gone to the mat for it like he has everything else. So if you take a look at what he said he was going to do, fundamentally transform America, well, as we used to say growing up on my side of town in Manchester, and there he was, gone. It's been done. And you know, you can it's jammed down our throats, but where were our guys?
Is America better for what Obama's done?
No. That's what I'm saying. Where were our guys? Where were the lawsuits? Where was the House of Representatives saying, no, we appropriate the money. This is not going to happen. You know, the whole Scott Brown thing, Obamacare, the reconciliation, the rules don't matter when certain parties are in control. And then we get in control, and what do? We give away the farm. We have people out there who say, oh, I'm against this, but I'm going to make all the procedural votes I need to bring it to the floor so I can go vote and lose, so I can then say I was against it. Well, as if we're all idiots.
Yeah. And that goes to strong leadership. Reagan wouldn't have put up with it. And, you know, we tried. I mean, there were, you know, Ted Cruz is a perfect example. You know, we'll shut down the government, and look at the backlash, because they don't have the... Shutting down
the government's the best thing. I mean, if shutting down the government, and this is what I don't understand about why they didn't get it, if shutting down the government was such a bad thing, why did the Republicans just completely stop the Democrats in the midterm elections again?
I agree with you.
All right.
I agree. We need to get some spine in our backbone.
Spine in our backbone. Fran, I'm going to let you wrap up with whatever comments you want to make.
Well, I hope people will consider coming to the summit Sunday. We can, you know, it's a big facility. We can always add a few more people. And I hope people will get out and vote, take part in the political process, and I hope that they will vote conservative and not liberal.
There you go. So, website, please, so people who...
603alliance.org.
603alliance.org. Fran Wendelboe, thanks for sharing about your organization with us here on the Girard at Large radio show.